Hey, I'm Super. The jinn, or genies, the more westernized term, are a concept in several cultures, mostly thought of as sort of a neutral force, neither wholly good or evil. I can't claim to be extremely well read on the topic of jinn, but neither are the creators of the most notable film franchise based around the jinn, the Wishmaster series. If anything, even with my very basic understanding, I'm an expert on the subject by comparison. So the Wishmaster series is about an ancient jinn who resides within a red gemstone, and once awakened by a mortal touching the gem, he just needs to get the person who awakened him to make 3 wishes, at which point he's free to release all of the jinn that exists to wreak havoc and rule the world. Also, he tends to twist the wisher's words back on them, usually resulting in their immediate death so that he can collect on their souls instantly. It's a solid business plan since he doesn't really need repeat customers. The jinn in these movies are unambiguously evil at all times and immortal, which is already a deviation from the most common versions of them that exist in most religion and folklore, in which jinn are considered more like humans than angels or demons, gods or devils, and they possess free will and are just as killable as a human being. There are roots of the jinn in early Eastern pre-Islamic religions as well as Islam itself, but none of that matters when viewing the Wishmaster films, in which the jinn exists to try to take over the world and make weird, cruel trickster bargains with humans in the meantime for fun. The first Wishmaster film was produced by Wes Craven, though he's not involved in any of the others. It was written by Peter Atkins, who also wrote the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Hellraiser movies, and directed by Robert Kurtzman, who is 1/3 of the KNB effects group, who did the visual and makeup effects on a variety of films, including Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, several Tarantino and George Romero movies, Halloween 5, A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, and a ton more. And the love of makeup effects is on full display in this first movie. Just in the first few minutes, it seems like they set up the entire scene to just do every weird off-the-wall effect they could think of. But the real centerpiece of this movie and the first sequel is Venezuelan actor Andrew Divoff. I'm not sure. Pretty sure one of those is correct. This guy does not chew the scenery. He's practically swallowing it whole throughout the entire performance. It's absolutely ridiculous and over the top, and it makes for the kind of movie you put on with your friends to just laugh at the absurdity of the entire thing. So the plot of Wishmaster is kind of like this. A statue with this red gem is accidentally dropped from a crane by a drunk worker played by Joe Pilato, who was the villain from my favorite zombie movie, Day of the Dead, and the reason this channel has the name Monkey Farm.
I'm running this monkey farm now, Frankenstein, and I want to know what the fuck you're doing with my time!
Anyway, the statue falls, crushes a man to death. The gem is freed and taken away by a construction worker with sticky fingers. The gem ends up with an auction appraiser named Alexandra, or Alex. She unknowingly awakens the jinn while examining it and then leaves it with a colleague to keep checking it out. That colleague then gets horribly injured when the gem explodes, and the jinn gets him to make a wish to be released from pain, so the jinn kills him. And a lot of the various wishes tend to go kind of like that. Once Alex starts investigating all this, she finds out about the jinn, that he needs her to make 3 wishes, or wishes, as the Wishmaster likes to call them, and that because the jinn are demons, any wish you make will end up turning on the wisher somehow, which isn't 100% how wishes play out in the film, but it's at least somewhat more consistent in this first film than it is in any of the ones after it. There's a jump scare early in this movie with a person who's just holding a jar of eyeballs. Nobody questions why they are carrying a jar of eyeballs around, but I have questions. Kane Hodder has a cameo in this as a security guard who gets killed because he tells the Wishmaster he'd have to walk through him to get into the office he's guarding, and says he'd like to see that. So the Wishmaster turns him into a glass door and shatters it, and that's all done with CGI, and I can't stress enough how weird it is to me that they hired Kane Hodder, who is a known stunt performer, for a cameo in which he does no stunts. Then the djinn gets a guy to say he'll only give him the info he wants if he gets $1 million. The Wishmaster then says it'll be done. It cuts to a scene of that guy's mother about to get on a plane and signing a life insurance agreement with the airline for $1 million if she dies, with her son as the beneficiary. Then it cuts to the plane exploding, and then we're back with the djinn who now has the info he wanted seemingly minutes later. And like, we're very much not supposed to think about this one too hard, because the way this would play out in real time is more like the djinn says, yes, this will be done. He waits in this guy's office, assuring him that he's about to get $1 million, like, just wait for it. Meanwhile, this poor woman gets on a plane. It crashes a while later. Let's say, like, to be generous, it happens on takeoff, so it's not even that long of a wait from the time that she had boarded. So half hour to an hour or so. This guy then gets a call that his mother has just died horribly. He doesn't even know yet at that point that he's a beneficiary on this life insurance, but even if he did know and they notified him immediately, life insurance doesn't usually pay out because of the bureaucracy for like a month or more. So the djinn has to just wait there and in this guy's office for a month or so, and that's being charitable with the amount of time it would take. And then this guy's like, well, I've got the $1 million. Here's that address. Hold on a second. You killed my mom. The Wishmaster's powers are kind of indistinct. They're stated as being very specifically limited by what other people wish for. But it doesn't really make sense. He frequently can use his powers just whenever, without a wish being made. And in some cases, what he does isn't even a twisting of the wisher's words, it's just straight up unrelated. Like, he shows up at a party where Tony Todd, the Candyman, I mean, he's not the Candyman in this, but you know what I mean, is guarding the door. He confides in the Wishmaster that he'd like to escape his life, which he finds kind of dull. So the djinn traps him inside a water tank, Houdini style, so he can't get out of it and he drowns. But like, his wish was to escape. That's the whole thing about wishes in this kind of story. Like, by the letter of his wish, he would be able to escape the tank. Like, the wish granter in this kind of story is going by the letter of your wish, but not the spirit of it. But they do have to follow the letter of it. So, like, that's the entire point of that kind of scenario. So it is kind of nonsense. Eventually, Alex makes her wishes, the first two of which are a complete waste of a good wish. She even gets a free wish just to show her that he can grant these wishes. So she actually gets 4 wishes, and only the final one is actually a good, clever wish. The other ones are just a complete waste of time. She wishes the crane operator 2 days ago hadn't been drunk on the job, causing everything that led to the gem being discovered and all. And that all gets undone, and only Alex knows what happened. The genie is back inside the gem again. Movie ends. Wishmaster isn't a good movie, but it's fun for watching the title character just to be completely outrageous and the ensuing chaos of it all. Wishmaster 2, Evil Never Dies.
Evil dies tonight.
Was the first of these sequels. This one was written and directed by Jack Shoulder, who had also directed the second Elm Street movie, Freddy's Revenge. He's since said that he feels mixed about this movie because while it has parts he likes, he doesn't think it's very good, and he thinks that the original is awful. So I'm kind of confused as to why he signed on for a sequel to a movie that he thought sucked, but whatever. While the original movie did have a theatrical release, this one was made for TV, and the following 2 movies were just direct-to-home video Canadian productions. The plot of Wishmaster 2 is kind of a remix of Part 1, a slightly different main character who is a thief whose lover dies in a robbery, but it's still a woman named Morgana finds this gem, releases the Wishmaster, who goes around getting people to make tricky wishes so he can collect their souls, while he tries to trick Morgana into making 3 wishes so he can unleash his friends and take over the world. 3 and 4 have the same framework, but with a few differences. 4 actually deviates a little bit more, but we'll get to that. The rules of his power tend to continue to be nonsense, but more so than they were in the first one, in that most of the djinn has to get them to say specifically that they wish for something, and then twist their words, but in a sort of plausible way where it's a phrase that can be taken 2 ways. But like, first thing, once he's back in a body in this movie, a cop says, "I'd like you to freeze," so he freezes the cop solid, which doesn't really fit what the cop said. Then when other cops ask him to explain what happened, He says he needed to chill out, like he's Arnold Schwarzenegger playing Mr. Freeze. Also, the police don't seem to be overly concerned with how the Jinn froze a man solid. Like, they ask him what happened. He has his quippy line there, and they have no follow-up questions. So the Wishmaster then goes to prison and gets a prisoner to say he wishes his lawyer would go fuck himself. Anyone could see where this is going. In fact, when I was first watching the first movie, before I'd even seen this or knew anything about it, there was a thought in my head of like, this movie would go in a really strange place if the Wishmaster was like, "What do you wish?" And someone was like, "I'd like you to go fuck yourself." And then they had to like go to that logical conclusion. But then, you know, they thought of it for the second movie. Anyway, so a scene involving the lawyer fucking himself occurs. It's best not to ponder the mechanics of it too much. It is not like visually graphic or anything, but it is like suggestive of something pretty awful. Yeah. Morgana is mourning her lost lover, but ends up getting help from a priest she knows who apparently she had a previous relationship before he joined the priesthood. They figure out that she needs to be pure to say the magic words while holding the gem in order to defeat the Jinn and imprison him again. So she takes off all her jewelry and makeup because they're clearly evil for some reason. She also has to cut open her hand because somewhere in all of this, they think that turning around and making her more impure will make it so that the Jinn can't collect on his 3 wishes. So she has sex with the priest, but that doesn't work either, and they had all of that sex for nothing. The Wishmaster gets a guy running a casino to say, you might say the casino wishes everyone the best of luck. And suddenly everyone in the casino is winning every game, and like, casinos can't make wishes because, and I don't know if you know this, and I'm not a doctor, but they are buildings and do not have souls. Later, it's shown that what's happened is he's getting the souls of the casino guests, which also doesn't really work or make sense because they didn't enter into an agreement with him through a wish. They just like showed up to the casino, and you know, this asshole who runs the place was like, I wish everyone luck, and it took their souls. That's bullshit. Either way, eventually Morgana wishes that a police officer at the robbery at the beginning of the film hadn't been killed by her, which now makes her pure enough of heart to say the magic words that trap the Jinn inside his red gem of doom again, and the movie's over. Wishmaster 3, Beyond the Gates of Hell, was next. This time the girl who finds the gem, Diana, is a college student whose parents die in a car accident when she was a child, which she considers her fault because she distracted them while they were driving. Doing these movies without Andrew Divoff was a mistake because the new guy here is just not the same. It's very unclear if the Jinn in these 4 movies is supposed to be the same character or not. Within the first 2 movies, it seems to me like it's supposed to be the same guy, but I don't know if the guys that are the Jinn in 3 and 4 are the same character, but it also doesn't really make a difference. The Jinn shows up and gets a guy to wish for 2 beautiful women. So they show up, but they're monsters who devour him for some reason. That one's a little bit overly baffling to me. The Wishmaster needs info from a file at this college, but the secretary there won't give it to him. She instead wishes that the files would all go up in flames. So he sets her on fire, but not the files. Like, again, it doesn't make sense with the wish that she made. This should actually have caused a setback for him by burning up the files with the information he wanted. And that actually could have been kind of interesting as like a, well, shit, they asked for this thing and it had an unforeseen consequence that actually screwed me over. But it doesn't do that. Like, nothing ever actually causes a setback for the Jinn. Over the course of watching these, it becomes very clear that these scripts were written in 1 or 2 passes, and then they just looked at them and went, it's good enough. The Jinn in this takes the face and form of a college professor, and then in a college lecture he puts forth the idea that the Trojan War happened because Helen of Troy asked a Jinn to make everyone fall in love with her. And it's a weird idea to put forward in this. Like, the entire story of the Trojan War already involved a conflict between the gods. Like, that's, you know, Roman mythology canon, I think. But this movie posits that it was all made up, and instead it's all because of this guy. Starting with part 2, these movies adapted a weird Eastern religion versus Western religion thing with the priest who had helped the main character in the second one. In this one, it really goes all in on that by having the spirit of the Archangel Michael possess the body of Diana's boyfriend to fight the Jinn. He has a sword that can kill the Wishmaster, but Diana's the one that has to wield it, and she's not able to because she's just not ready. Most of the rest of the movie is variations on the theme of people wish for stuff, the Jinn grants them, but in a messed up way that kills them, while he's trying to get Diana to make her third wish so that he can unleash hell on Earth. She gets into a car accident near the end that's very similar to the one that had killed her parents, with the car getting flipped over and being about to explode. There's no attempt, though, to give that symmetry any kind of emotional resonance. Like, I think that's what they were going for, but instead of a kind of thing where she overcomes a fear or accepts that her parents' death was not her fault, nothing really happens there. The event occurs, but it's very quickly glossed over so that they can move on to the next scene. At the end, Diana decides to jump from a building and kill herself, because if she dies before making that third wish, the Jinn can't prevail. And because of her willingness to sacrifice herself that way, she's now worthy of the sword and able to kill the Jinn. It's a bit of an odd plot point, because the good side of this movie seems to be very Catholic based, and the Catholic view on suicide is not exactly positive. Either way, the fourth and final movie in this series, Wishmaster, The Prophecy Fulfilled, exists. I had trouble watching this movie and figuring out what to even say about it here, because so much of this plot revolved around a person who is disabled and their partner becoming a full-time caregiver. And having been through that experience in real life, the situation is very close to home for me, but I will give this a shot. So the main characters in this are Sam, who gets into a motorcycle accident and loses the use of his legs, his girlfriend Lisa, who dedicates herself to taking care of him, and their friend and attorney Stephen. Sam thinks Lisa is having an affair with Stephen, and it's very clearly shown that Stephen and Lisa have some feelings for each other but haven't acted on them. Stephen gives Lisa a weird, creepy box as a gift while they're working on the case to get a settlement for Sam for his accident. It's very clearly a borderline romantic gesture, which is on the edge of unethical and tacky as hell. During the scene, Stephen says to her, "If bad timing were fatal, I'd be roadkill," which, considering the situation, is a terrible choice of words, since they're there to discuss a settlement from a traffic accident. So the weird creepy box breaks, a red gem falls out, same one that we have seen before. You can see where this is going. Lisa touches it, the Jinn is awakened. Shortly after this, Lisa leaves, the Wishmaster kills Stephen and steals his face, like he does, and begins trying to find a way to trick Lisa into making wishes, as is the pattern of this series. One difference to the rest of the films, Lisa doesn't know what her wishes are doing or that the Wishmaster exists at all for most of the film. At some point, she wishes Sam could walk again. And the way this movie portrays a disabled person getting back his mobility as body horror, and the way Sam reacts afterwards to getting exactly what he wanted with seemingly no drawbacks, is something I was not on board for. It's necessary for him to continue to be a jerk for the plot to happen, but there's a real disconnect in my brain. And not to be too personal about it, but when my wife was alive and unable to walk for the last few years of her life, if she'd received this kind of overnight miracle, she would have been overjoyed. This guy treats it like it's a curse, and it's weird and baffling. He storms off after Lisa is very willing to have sex with him, which has been portrayed throughout the movie up until now as the one thing he really wants, even more than being able to walk again. So he's being handed exactly what he wants, and instead is like, fuck you, universe, for no discernible reason. I think that we're supposed to just intimate that this guy's just kind of an asshole, and had been the entire time. It's just weird. A girl asks the Jinn for killer sex, and then suddenly she's levitating and having uncontrollable orgasms, which apparently kills her. But it happens off screen, and I'm curious, can you die from that? There's a subplot where this angel with a big sword shows up to kill Lisa to prevent the wishes from being granted. And it really feels like a guy from the set of the Highlander TV series wandered onto this set and they decided to just roll with it. It feels very out of place, but both of these things were filmed in Canada, so I choose to believe that that is exactly what happened and that this was not scripted. Anyway, the third wish that Lisa makes is, "I wish I could love you for who you truly are," referring to Stephen. The catch here, of course, is that the djinn who is masquerading as Stephen realizes this is the one wish he can't grant with magic, because you can't make someone fall in love with you, you have to romance them first. In the process of him trying to do this, they seem to be trying to say that the djinn is catching feelings himself. Eventually, he forges a note from Sam telling Lisa he's left her and to go on with her life. The Wishmaster then uses that to trick Lisa into having sex with him. And afterwards, he's like, "So you're in love with me now because we did the sex, right?" And she's still unsure if she loves him.
You are tearing me apart, Lisa!
He confesses that he orchestrated all of this and forged the note from Sam and gets real pushy about trying to get her to say that she loves him. This bothers her, but considering he just admitted to committing rape by fraud, I don't know that she seems bothered enough, to be honest. Still, she tries to escape him. He reveals that he is this weird, monstrous creature. He prevents her from being able to actually escape. And then Sam shows up with the angel's sword from earlier and tries to kill the djinn, but the djinn impales him on the sword instead. Lisa then tricks the djinn by acting like she's going to agree to love him so he can unleash hell on earth and get what he wants, but instead pushes him into the blade of the sword that is still sticking out of Sam's dying body. The djinn and Sam both die, and Lisa just kind of walks out of the house and leaves with a big smile on her face. Leaving her boyfriend's dead body in a house her name is attached to. And it seems like, you know, the cops should be questioning her about that at some point, and I wonder what her story would be exactly. Also, she doesn't seem to be all that upset that he just got murdered. Like, the tone of it is very odd and upbeat, and it's just very strange. So some thoughts on this series as a whole. I truly think, that this is a property that actually would benefit from a remake with a more solid script. I think most remakes, especially horror remakes, are pointless and awful, but they're usually remaking something that was already executed very well and has withstood the test of time and is still like a big property, even years after they've stopped making movies on them. Wishmaster doesn't really have that. It was not really well executed, and it's not exactly a huge beloved franchise like Nightmare on Elm Street or Halloween or something. But like, do a remake, keep in the horror celebrity cameos, those are fine. Keep in the over-the-top effects makeup because that stuff is great. By all means, keep all of that. Keep the entire concept of this djinn who finds a way to twist your own desires back on you by twisting your words. But stay a bit more true to having a set of rules on how and when the Wishmaster's powers work, instead of his powers being sort of arbitrary and only limited by what would be funny, even if it's nonsense. Like, go deeper on the horror of getting what you want, but not the way you wanted it, in a way that holds up to the internal logic of the series. Like, yes, this series is very silly, but I think you could keep some of that silliness and campiness, but still have the wishes and how they go wrong be something that feels more real and has more horror to it, and has some thought put into it. And for this remake, as much removing and stealing people's faces as this series has, I suggest casting Nicolas Cage as the djinn. Because this whole enterprise is at its best when the djinn is completely over the top. And I think it's plausible that you could get Nick Cage to do this as a reboot. He doesn't seem to be very picky, and he could really go to town on a flick like this. And it's also, it's been almost 40 years since the fourth movie. I think it came out in 2002, so next year will be 20 years since the last time they did a thing. So maybe it's kind of due for having like a reboot treatment that's a little bit more big budget and a little bit more modernized. I truly love the idea of making a reboot of this the more I think about it, and I'm really not kidding. Like, if I had the clout to get a movie made right now, it would probably be this right now if someone asked. Overall, I do think that the first two of these movies are worth seeing if you love weird effects and low-budget schlock, but the third and fourth movie are very skippable and basically awful films. But a remake of this with Nicolas Cage as an over-the-top, ridiculous genie who grants wishes that destroy lives, It's all I've ever wished for. Thanks for coming to my meltdown. If you liked this and want more, you can hit like and subscribe to my channel. I'm a bit behind on all the movies that I wanted to do for October, so I'll be stretching this out and continuing into November with more horror because I can do whatever I want.